warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining in our podcast today. My name is Nordiana and my partner Melati. Today we are going to discuss about summary with a summary book with title Language Assessment Principle and Classroom Practice Third Edition books. Okay, we are going to discuss chapter 1 that is assessment concept and issue. Okay, for the first I will explanation the part 1. uh, what is assessment concept and issue? For the objectives, after reading this chapter, you will be able to understand difference between assessment and testing, along with other basic assessment concept and terms distinguished among 5 different types of language tests. Cite example of each and apply them for different purposes and context. Appreciate historical and tendencies of recent day trends and research in language assessment grasp some major current issue that assessment researchers are now addressing. Okay. For the bottom lines, tests need not be degrading or threatening to your students. Can they instead build a person confidence and become learning experience? Uh, can they become an integral part of a student's ongoing classroom development? Can they bring out the best in students? The answer is yes. That's mostly what this book is about, helping you create more authentic, intrinsically motivating assessment procedure that are appropriate for their context and designed to offer constructive feedback to your students. Okay, for to reach goals, it is important to understand some basic concept. The first is what do we mean by assessment? The second is what is difference between assessment and a test? And the third is how do various categories of assessment and tests fit into the teaching learning process? Okay, for the first is assessment and testing. Assessment, what is assessment? Assessment is a popular and sometimes misunderstood term in certain educational practice. You might think of assessing and testing as synonymous term, but they are not. Let's differentiate the two concepts. Tests, on the other hand, are a subset of assessment, a genre of assessment techniques. They are preferred administrative procedure that occur at identifi- identifiable times in a curriculum when learners must learn all their faculties to offer peak performance. Okay, knowing that their responses are being measured and evaluated, in scientific terms, a test is a method of measuring a person's abilities, knowledge of or performance in a given domain. Okay. For the second, measurement and evaluation. Okay, two frequently occurring yet potentially confusing terms that often appear in discussion of assessment and testing are measurement and evaluation, because the terms lie somewhere between assessment and testing. They are at times mistakenly used as synonymous of one or the other concept. uh, let's take a brief look at the two process. Okay, what is measurement? Measurement is the process of quantifying the observed performance of classroom learners. Menurut Bachman, 1090 county us to distinguish between quantitative and qualitative description of student performance. Simply put, the former include assigning numbers, including rankings and letter grades to observe performance. Okay, for the last is assessment and learning. Returning to our contrast between test and assessment, we find that tests are a subset of assessment, but they are certainly not the only form of assessment that a teacher can apply at the same time during these practice activities. assessing students' performance, possibly taking measure quality feedback and suggesting strategies. For example, how did the performance compare with previous performance? Which aspect of the performance were better than others? Is the learner performing up to and expects potential? What can the learner do to improve performance the next time? How does the performance compare with that of others in the same learning community? In the ideal classroom, all this observation fit into the way the teacher provides instruction to each student. Okay, maybe that's all from me. For the next explanation, we'll explain by my partner, Melati. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you for the chance, Nordiana. Now I will explain the next about the assessment. There are informal and formal assessment. Informal assessment can take a number of forms, starting with incidental, unplanned comments and responses, along with coaching and other improv to feedback to the students. And formal assessments are exercises or producers specifically designed to tap into a storehouse of skills and knowledge. There are semantic, planet sampling techniques constructed to give a teacher and student an appraisal of student achievement. To extend the tennis analogy, formal assessment are the tournament games that occur periodically in the course of a regimen of practice. And next, formative and summative assessment. Formative assessment is the evaluating students in the process of forming their competencies and skills with the goal of helping them to continue that growth process. The key to such formation is the delivery by the teacher and internalization by the student of appropriate feedback on performance, with an eye toward the future continuation or formation of learning. And summative assessment aims to measure or summarize what a student has grasped and typically occurs at the end of a course or unit of instruction. As a summation of what the student has learned implies looking back and taking stock unit of instruction. Looking back and taking stock of how well that student has accomplished objective, but it does not necessarily point to future progress. And then final exams in a course and general proficiency exams are examples of summative assessment. And then summative assessment often, but not always, involve evaluation or decision making. And next, norm references and criterion reference tests. Norm reference tests, each test takers score in interpreted in relation to a mean or average score, median, or middle score. Standard definition extent of variance in scores and or percentile rank. The purpose of such tests is to place test takers in rank order along a mathematical continuum. And then criterion reference tests, on the other hand, are designed to give test takers feedback, usually in the form of grades on specific course or lesson objective. And classroom tests involving students in only one course and connected to a particular curriculum are typical of criterion reference testing. And next, there are types and purposes of assessment. The types and purposes of assessments. The first, there are achievement tests. The most frequent purpose for which a classroom teacher uses a test to measure learners' ability within a classroom lesson, a unit, or even an entire curriculum. And the next, diagnostic test. The purpose of a diagnostic test is to identify aspects of a language that the student needs to develop or that a course school should include. And next, there is placement test, some achievement and proficiency test can act as placement test, the purpose of which is to place a student into a particular level or section of a language curriculum or school. And next, proficiency test. If your aim is to test global competence in a language, then you are in conventional terminology testing proficiency. A proficiency test is not limited to any one course, curriculum, or single skill in the language. Rather, it tests overall ability. And the last one is aptitude test. This last type of the test no longer enjoys the widespread use in on-chat. An aptitude test is designed to measure capacity or general ability to learn a foreign language as priori or before taking a course. An ultimate predicted success in the undertaking, language aptitude test were conceivability designed to apply to the classroom learning of any language. Okay, the next is about issue in language assessment. Then and now. Historically, language testing trends and practice have followed the shifting sense of teaching methodology. For a description of this trend, see Brown and Lee, 2015. Teaching by principle or TBP, at the chapter 2, maybe you can read it. And for example, in the 1940s and 1960s, an era of behaviorism and spatial attention to constructive analysis, language tests focused on specific linguistic elements such as the phonological, grammatical, and lexical contrast between two languages. And in the 1970s and 1980s, communicative theories of language brought with them a more interrogative view of testing in which specialists claimed that the whole of the communicative event was considerable greater than the sum of its linguistic elements. By Clark on 1983 p. 432. Today, test designers are still challenged in their quest for more authentic, valid instruments that simulate real-world interaction. Leung and Leukowicz, 2006. The next, behavioral influences on language testing. Through the middle of the 20th century, language teaching and testing were both strongly influenced by behavioral psychology and structural linguistics. Both traditions emphasize sentence-level grammatical paradigms, definition of vocabulary items, and translation from first language, or L1, to second language, or L2, and places only minor focus on real-world authentic communication. And tests often consisted of grammar and vocabulary items in multiple choice from format along with a variety of translation exercises ranging from words to sentences to short paragraph. And next, interrogative approaches in the midst of this favor language pedagogy was rapidly moving in more communicative direction, and testing specialists were forged into a debate that would soon respond to the changes. The discrete point approach presupposed that contextualization that was proving to be inauthentic. So as the professions emerged into an era emphasizing communication, authenticity, and context, new approaches were sought. And next, communicative language testing. By the mid in 1980s, especially in the wake of Canal and Swins in 1980, seminal work on communicative competence, the language testing field had begun to focus on designing communicative test texts. And there are components of language competence. The first, like organizational competence, there are two types. The first, grammatical, that including lexicon, morphology, and phonology. And the second is textual or discourse. And the next is pragmatic competence. There are two types too. The first, illocutionary, like functions of language, and the second, sociologistic, like including culture, context, pragmatics, and purpose. And next, about performance-based assessment. During the past 2 decades, an increasing number of educators and advocates for educational reform have argued to the emphasis large-scale standardized tests in favor of contextualized communicative assessments that better facilitate learning in our schools. And the last one is current hot topics in language assessment. Designing communicative performance-based assessment rubrics continues to challenge assessment experts and classroom teachers alike. Such efforts to improve various facets of classroom testing and accompanied by some simulating issues, all of which are shaping our current understanding of effective assessment. And 3 important topics that include like dynamic assessment, assessing pragmatic competence, and the last one is the increasing use of technology in assessment of various kinds. Okay, maybe that's all about our explanation about the chapter 1. Thank you for the attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.